Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is a brand new video. This is not a re-upload from my other channel. This is my first real wrap-up video that hasn't been seen by anybody on this channel or my last channel. And I needed to do another wrap-up video. And I was kind of debating on whether or not I wanted to do wrap-up videos every time I finish 3 books. So each wrap-up video would be a little bit shorter. Let me know if that's something that you guys would like, if you would like shorter wrap-ups with less books, or if you like the longer style wrap-ups with like 6 to 8 books. Wrap-ups would come out a lot more if I did it that way, but because short content is so popular now, I thought having like shorter wrap-up videos might be kind of nice. So let me know if that's something that you guys would like. But in this video, I have 2 books from last year that I forgot to wrap up in my last wrap-up video. I don't know how that happened. So I'm going to talk about those 2 first, and then I'm going to go into the newer books that I read this year. So the first book that I read last year that I forgot to talk about was, what is it called? I always forget what this book is called for some reason. The Secrets of Us by Lucinda Berry. So I've read so many of Lucinda Berry's books now. Like, Lucinda Berry is an interesting author to me because I love reading her when I'm cleaning. Like, she just has really good like cleaning books because they're really fast-paced, they're pretty short, they're pretty to the point, and they are psychological thrillers. So she's like a really good cleaning author, if you know what I mean. So I always listen to them on audio. But the interesting thing about Lucinda Berry is I've never actually given her books 5 stars before. None of her books for me have gotten 5 stars. But this book in particular has gotten the highest rating out of all of her books that I've read. And I really, really liked this book. I thought this one was really good. It was really, really unique. And I really like kind of how she went about the character's trauma in this one. So basically what it's about is this girl whose husband passed away, and everybody thinks like obviously this person killed her husband, like duh. And she is not talking. She won't talk about it. It's kind of like The Silent Patient in that way, but it's like not really like that. And the kind of main character of the story feels like she's the only person that can get her sister to talk because they're so close. And so she's really trying to figure out how to get her sister to talk. And it kind of goes from past to future, and it kind of talks about some past traumas that they experienced. And I thought it was really interesting because it really kind of explores trauma in a very realistic way. Like, do you ever feel like when you read like fantasy books or something and like the main character goes through something like really traumatizing, like they accidentally kill somebody or they like do something horrible and it takes them like a week to get over it, and you're like, don't they ever like feel anything? Like, you kind of feel like they get over it really easy, or it like doesn't affect them very much. This is a really good book because it really shows what trauma can do to somebody. If, you know, you're just a regular person, a very, very sweet person, and you have good intentions all the time, and then you experience something really traumatic, and like what that can do to somebody like that, and what it can do to somebody that's just like a normal person that experiences something crazy. And I think that this book really dives into that really well. I think she has her master's in child psychology, so she really does know the field really well, and she kind of understands psychology a little bit better than some authors do. So I feel like she's really, really good at those types of stories. And this one is definitely the best one I've read by her so far. I will probably read more by her in the future, but this one is definitely the best, and I highly recommend it if you like psychological thrillers. So the next book that I forgot to talk about from last year is Our Wives Under the Sea. Now, this book I thought sounded really interesting. It's basically about these 2 women. They're married, and one of the women is like a submarine, like sea biologist or something like that, and she goes down in submarines a lot to do her work. And in this particular book, she gets stuck in a submarine under the sea, and they don't think that they're going to be able to survive, basically. And they end up surviving, luckily. But this story takes place kind of like in the present time, where her wife is trying to like help her through that trauma, and she's kind of trying to learn about what happened down there, and the other wife is kind of like telling the story from her perspective when she was stuck down there. But it kind of has like horror elements as well, which I wasn't really prepared for. So if you want something kind of scary, this does have those qualities. But to be honest, I think I gave this book 3 stars. But I kind of felt a little disappointed. It definitely has one of those really weird open endings where it's supposed to be kind of scary, but you don't exactly know like what you're supposed to be afraid of, and then it kind of ends really weird. Kind of ends really open, which I'm not a huge fan of open endings usually, and this is a good example of a type of open ending that I don't really like. It just kind of feels like you don't really understand what's going on, I guess is the best way to explain it. I don't know. Like, it just didn't have a very big impact on me. I thought the story overall was pretty interesting, but it was just a little bit, I don't know, underwhelming sort of for me. Now I know that a lot of people do like this, and if you do tend to like really weird books that are just kind of strange, then you may like this. I do like weird books as well, but this one for some reason just didn't work for me. So the next book that I read this year was The Perfect Child. This is also by Lucinda Berry. Now, it's funny because at the beginning of this year, I swear I've like read so many crazy child books. Like, you know, like those dark children that are like kind of crazy and like you don't really understand what's going on. That's kind of how I feel like I was reading for a while, and I wasn't doing it on purpose. I just kept happening to pick up these dark children books, and this was definitely in that area. I have read so many of these books now, I feel like, and this one wasn't actually bad. I did like this one. I would say The Push, if you're looking for kind of like a dark child book, The Push is definitely my favorite out of all the ones that I have read, but this one actually wasn't too bad either. So this is basically about a husband and a wife who can't have children, and one day this kid comes into the hospital because the husband is a doctor, and she comes in with like clearly looking like she's been completely neglected, and they don't know who her parents are. She has no record, and so they decide to kind of like adopt or kind of foster this child, I guess, until they can kind of figure out where she came from, and they never can really figure it out, so they decide to adopt her. Well, of course, somebody with a lot of trauma, a child especially with a lot of trauma, can have some issues, right? And they end up finding out that this child has a lot of issues, and she turns out to be a little bit crazy, and the husband doesn't actually believe that this little girl has, you know, trauma and issues and mental issues, but the mother does, and she's kind of like, you know, she's like pitting us against each other. And the only like I think irritating part to this book was there was a couple characters that really drove me insane. Like, you know, when characters are just overly stupid and you're like, come on. Like, you wouldn't actually be doing this in real life, right? Like, it's just unrealistic, and some of the ways that people act or think or whatever. That's my only kind of downside to this book. But the main thing about this book that frustrated me was the open ending. This had an open ending that was really, really, like, underwhelming. And now the interesting thing about this book is there was actually a epilogue, and she took it out because her editor said, oh, I don't think we need this epilogue. So there was an epilogue there, and she took it out because of her editor. And she actually has it on her Facebook page. She reads the epilogue to us, and the epilogue adds so much to the story, and I'm so mad at her editor for telling her to take it out because I feel like it added so much to the ending, and it made it so the ending actually wrapped up a little bit. So that was kind of frustrating. So if you read this, know that the ending is open, but you can read the original epilogue if you go to Lucinda Berry's Facebook page. So this wasn't a bad book. If you like the darker children's stories, this one definitely is that. But if you've never read a dark child story before and you want to start, I would definitely recommend reading The Push first, because in my opinion that one is the best. So the next one I read, this was called Off the Deep End, and this is her newest book, and this one was really weird. This one was like all over the place in regards to like where she decided to take this story. I was like, whoa, like there's a lot that you're putting into this story, right? Like she was trying to do twists, and I can understand like why she decided to make some of these choices, but it was just weird because she put so many topics and themes and stuff into one story, and you're like, whoa, it's like you're getting slapped across the face with all this like weird stuff, and you're just like, what the heck? So that's the kind of weird thing about reading this story, and if you can kind of get past like the weirdness and these like weird twists that are just so from like left field, then you might like this. This is about a woman who is driving her son and her son's friend home from like a basketball game or something, and they fly into a lake, and she tries to save her son because she can only save one, and she ends up accidentally saving her son's friend. And so what the story is basically about is her and her son's friend like working through this really traumatic experience, and like, so it's kind of like a weird like relationship that forms between these two people who experience something really, really traumatic, and how like a trauma bond can form. And I thought that was really interesting because I've never really read a book about a trauma bond, and this kind of explained what a trauma bond is, but it went like way, way farther than like I feel like it would in like a normal real life situation, but that's like the point of a book, you know? But this was okay. Like I said, the twists were really from left field. I kind of felt like she put way too much into this book, and it was kind of like odd, like the directions that she took at times, but it was okay. Like it entertained me while I was cleaning, and so I feel like that I can give it something for that. I think I gave this book 3 stars. That was definitely not my favorite Lucinda Berry, but it was entertaining. It just wasn't like the best one I've ever read, if that makes sense. So the next book I read was on my top 10 books I want to read for the year, 2 years in a row, and I didn't read them both of those years. And then this year, when I didn't put it on that list, I decided to pick it up like one of the first books I read of the year, which is hilarious because it just proves that I hate mandatory reading. It just puts too much pressure on me, I guess. But it is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Now, this book is a dark book. This book is about grooming by a professor, or not a professor, a high school teacher basically. And he basically grooms Vanessa and they form a relationship, and like a sexual relationship, while she's like 15. And it's dark. Any grooming story to me is like really dark and disturbing, and this one really gets under your skin at times because it's so realistic. Like I feel like the author said this isn't like a true story. She said she had experiences with grooming when she was younger from a teacher, but this isn't her story. It's a completely different story. And she wanted to make that very, very clear. So this isn't a true story, but it feels so true because the characters are so flawed and realistic. Like she doesn't make this girl that's being groomed completely likable. She makes her very real with realistic thoughts and realistic feelings and like kind of a rebel quality to her, kind of a pessimist and like very just apathetic to a lot of things. And she definitely has this quality where she isn't fully likable either, even though she's the victim in this situation. She's still really frustrating sometimes to read. And then the teacher is so gross and so disturbing at times. Like there were times when I was reading this where I was like, oh my god, like this is making me so uncomfortable. And I'm like, how is this relationship functional? Like how, but like you get it though, because they're both really effed up people. You know what I mean? Even though Vanessa is the victim and she always will be the victim, they're still both just very disturbed people, and you can tell that this trauma that she experienced in this situation really messed her up and really had an effect on her long term. Like you can tell that like even though she thought that she was in control and that she was like choosing all of this stuff, like that the reason why she had so many weird mixed feelings about the situation was because being groomed by your teacher messes you up. You know what I mean? And that's what I think that this book did really, really well, is it just felt so real. And I have read true stories of grooming and stuff, and those books are really great as well, but this one just felt so realistic, and I think that's why this book is so good. The only reason I took off 4 stars is because I feel like it just didn't need to be this long. Like I felt like some of the scenes just weren't necessary, and it was just kind of like the same thing over and over again. But I can't deny the fact that this was like really well written, like really, really well written. Perfectly fleshed out characters, perfectly imperfect characters, and it was just phenomenal. So My Dark Vanessa is great if you're looking for like a darker read. It's definitely gonna make you feel uncomfortable, and there's definitely a lot of trigger warnings in here, so beware. So the next book that I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and this is a book that is really popular, but I feel like you either love it or you hate it. Like I've heard a lot of really, really positive things about this book, but also a lot of negative things. And that's why I was really excited to read this, because I've never read a Riley Sager before, and everyone said this is his best one, at least in like their opinion. So I was like, okay, well maybe if I read a Riley Sager, that's the first one I should read. And I have to say, I am in the party that's kind of not in love with this book. There was just something about this book. Okay, one of my least favorite things in books. Now this is going to be kind of a spoiler. Go ahead and mute it when I put spoiler down here. As soon as spoiler is gone, you can unmute it and you won't be spoiled. One thing that I absolutely hate in books more than anything is the trope of like, it was all just a dream, which means like everything that you read in this entire book wasn't real. Like what was the point of reading it if like it wasn't even real, it was all made up, or it was all just a dream or whatever. Like I literally hate that so much because I feel like it's such a waste of time when the book isn't even real. Like it was all made up or it was all just a dream. It's like, why did I read it then? Like why did I read it? Why was I reading all of that stuff? Like it just seems pointless, you know what I mean? And that is literally what the trope was for this book. I get really, really frustrated when things go that route, and that is definitely the route that it went. So this is basically about a girl who grew up in this really weird house, this haunted house, and her dad wrote a story about this haunted house and why they moved out of this haunted house because it was just so crazy. And she wants to know if this story that her dad wrote is real because it's affected her entire life because this book got super famous. And so she goes back to this house after her father dies because he leaves it to her, and she's trying to figure out if this book is real, and then weird stuff starts happening and she finds out there was a murder and all this stuff. And also the thing is I predicted this. I was like, I knew what was gonna happen, and I was pretty spot on. I wasn't completely spot on with every little twist and turn, but for the most part I had it, and I feel like it's a pretty easy book to predict in that way. But it was just okay to me. I felt like it was a little boring. I wasn't all that interested in the characters. I felt like it got a little bit repetitive at times, and it just... You know, I think that sometimes I'm not a paranormal girl when it comes to horror, and I think it's because it's not realistic. Like, I don't believe in the paranormal, really, so paranormal stuff doesn't scare me because I don't really believe in it, you know? So that's the only downside to this. Will I read more Riley Sager? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe in the future I will, but yeah, this was just okay. Not my favorite. Okay, so the next book I read is one of my favorite authors. And we actually live very close to each other, like very, very close to each other. I didn't even really realize that she lived like almost in my town and that we could like hang out if we wanted to, but I think that's really awesome. But I freaking love these books, and if you have not read them yet, you need to get on it because they are so funny. And it was the second book, which is Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Brosh. Now the first book that she wrote is Hyperbole and a Half, which is literally one of the funniest books of all time. And this book doesn't disappoint. Like, if you're looking for something that is going to make you cry laughing, this is it right here. Like, there were multiple times that I was laughing so hard, I was crying, and I was like taking screenshots and like sending them to my cousin because I was like, this is totally my sense of humor, this is totally her sense of humor, and you have to read these. They're so funny. Now, like any short story collection, because this is kind of like short story graphic novels of like her life experiences and stuff, some of the stories really aren't going to hit, but then other stories really are going to be like the funniest things you've ever read, and I feel like that's just kind of how it is when you read short stories. Like, not all the short stories are going to be for you, and they're just going to be kind of like, you know, so-so. And I feel like that was kind of the case with this. Like, I didn't love every story that I read, but like it was worth sifting through to find those gems, and that's kind of how I felt with like her first book as well. Not all the stories got me, but definitely like some of them really, really did. So just, if you can go to your library and pick these up, you just have to. And the artwork is literally the best thing in the world. The artwork is just so funny. Like, she used to have a blog, like a web comic blog type of thing, and her artwork is literally what makes these books what they are, because the artwork is so funny in themselves. Plus she has like a very sarcastic, very dry sense of humor. Like, both her writing and her art just mesh so well together, and it's just perfect. Okay, so the last book that I read that I'm going to talk about in this video was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. I read this on my Kindle, and I thought this was so adorable. So I almost gave this 5 stars, but there's definitely reasons why I didn't give this 5 stars. But it was really close to being a 5-star read, and part of the reason why I almost gave this 5 stars is because I absolutely loved the setting of this book. Like, this book is one of those stories that you just want to live in, and you just want to sit in the story and read about these characters forever, because you become so attached to every single character in this book. And this author, I don't know, I've never read her books before. I don't even know what else she has written. I want to read more of her books. She is really, really, really good at writing characters. She just fleshes them out so they're their own individual character that you really, really love. And that's how I know I'm really going to love to just sit in a novel, is if I love all the characters separately and they all feel like real people. And this book had that, like 100%. And this book takes place in Alaska, by the way. And so basically what happens in this book is this girl, she gets a call from her dad, and her and her dad haven't had a relationship their entire life, but she's kind of tried, and he called her and told her, you know, I just got diagnosed with cancer and I'm going to die soon, and she decides to go up to Alaska and spend time with her dad just so she can get to know her dad and ask him questions and just get to know him before he passes away, because she doesn't want to have any regrets. So she goes up there, and it's kind of her experiencing Alaska for the first time, being with her dad, forming a relationship with her dad, and like his family around him. And in that process she meets Jonah, who is his neighbor, and he works for his plane charter company, and they end up kind of like forming a relationship. And it is just a endearing book, and this book actually made me tear up, which you guys know is extremely rare for me. I don't tear up in books very often. But yeah, it was just one of those books that you just want to sit in and read because it's just so endearing and it just makes you feel like all the feelings. Like that's how this book was. I wanted to just keep reading it and keep reading it and keep reading it. The only thing about this novel, like I love, one of my favorite types of love interests in books is like the big burly manly man with like a manly man job, and I just love that type of love interest who is just very like who just takes care of things, right? I just like that, and that's definitely how Jonah is in this book. But he's kind of a jerk, and the only thing that bothered me was at the end. I did like Jonah and Calla together, I really did, and I wanted them to be together, like your typical end of a romance and stuff, but this book felt so realistic in how she created the characters that I was like, this reminds me of like one of those relationships where you're in your honeymoon stage, but then once you're like with the person for a really long time, you're gonna start getting really, really annoyed with how they are. And I kind of felt like Jonah was kind of a jerk. He was kind of just blunt and he joked about weird things, and I feel like over time, Calla was gonna get really annoyed with Jonah. Like, yes, she loves to like sleep with him right now and like do all that kind of stuff, but long term, she's just gonna get really annoyed with him and like the way that he is. That's kind of how I felt. Like it was just two, they were just kind of different. Like yeah, they really, really liked each other, but they were also really, really different, but not in like a good way, you know? And my biggest pet peeve in the entire world, because I deal with this literally all the time. Like this is something that I deal with in my life and I've dealt with it forever and I literally hate it. And this book had it so much in it and it just irritates me so bad. And it's this idea that if a girl likes makeup, if a girl likes fashion, if a girl likes to take care of her skin, if she likes to wear cute workout clothes when she works out, then she is lesser than, or she has a problem, or she's vain, or she's materialistic. I hate that. And literally Jonah throughout this entire book was giving her a hard time about wearing makeup, or that she liked to wear makeup, or that she liked to look cute. One of my least favorite lines that somebody can say is, "You don't need all of that stuff." Excuse me? I don't need all of that stuff? Like, I get where you're coming from and I get that you're trying to say that to be like nice, but it's annoying because you don't need fishing. You don't need to read all those books that are on your shelf, Jonah. Like, nobody needs their hobby. Nobody needs to do this. Nobody needs that. But it's only okay to say to women who like makeup, you don't need all that. Yeah, I don't need all this, but I like all this, so stop making me feel bad for it. And Jonah kept stealing her makeup and hiding it from her and like giving her a hard time for wanting to wear cute clothes, and I literally can't stand that, and that was one of the things that really kind of like took down a star for me, because like in It Happened One Summer, which is one of my favorite romances of all time, it was a similar scenario, which is one of my favorite kind of tropes where like the city girl goes to like a small town and meets like this gruff, burly man type of thing. I love that dynamic. But with It Happened One Summer, Brennan didn't try to change Piper. He let her be who she is. He let her be the fashion girl, the girl that loves makeup, the girl that wants to carry around her lipstick purse, you know, and he didn't try to change that about her. He accepted her for who she was, and that's what I liked about it. But Jonah didn't. He said really annoying things like, "You don't need all of that stuff." That's my rant. So I gave it 4 stars. But it's still cute. Like, if you like those same dynamics that I like, then I think that you would probably really like this. And if you like more of a heart-warming romance with like, where romance is a big part of the story, but there's another big plot line with it, this book is definitely that. Like, it has the romance, but also like a really big other plot line that you can kind of enjoy as well. This has both of those things, and it's really heartwarming, and it's gonna probably make you tear up. That is it for this video. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys liked my first book video for this channel that hasn't been on my last channel, and keep an eye out for more videos. Also, let me know if you guys want me to do 3 book wrap-ups in the future, or if you guys like these longer version ones. I don't know, it's up to you guys. But yeah, that's it. So I will see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.